Thankfulness. To clarify what is meant here by thankfulness, we must consider the subjects to which it should apply. We must decide what impressions and perceptions are to be noted and intensified, because they have a vital and real value, and distinguish them from those whose value is uncertain or only relative. Our senses are receiving stations, which transmit to the brain information regarding the appearances of things in terms of sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell. The brain translates and records these with such faculties as it has. That is, it defines, classifies, and values the impressions received, according to two principles: association of ideas and comparison with previous notions. Beyond this, its experience cannot go, for its power of judgment is restricted by the quantity and exactness of the notions it already possesses, and these in turn depend on the acuteness of its sense perceptions and the faithfulness of its records. In other words, they are always relative, since they are always affected by the personality of the percipient. With the inner sense, this is not so. They can enter into direct contact with the essence and rhythm of things, by tuning or synchronizing that faculty in the observer which is identical in the thing observed. Thus there are two opposite patterns of life, which evoke opposite reflexes. Sense perception is brought from outside by the five senses, and the tendency of the sensory man will always be to expand his life and joy outside himself. But all true knowledge comes from within, and the meditative man will find his strength by concentrating his vital force and joy within himself. A feeling violently expressed is soon exhausted, but a sorrow brooded over in secret may take root and become the cause of an incurable disease. Joy brooded over in silence becomes a source of intense heat, like a fire covered with ashes. Joy is an emotional expansion of the sensitive fibers of one's being, which open themselves in order to better experience the object or cause of their exaltation. But the springs of human joy are almost always poisoned by possessiveness, and the joy of possession is restricted by the object possessed, and by the fear of losing it. Possession is a form of satisfaction, and satisfaction is akin to satiety and saturation, which do not imply joy. For in joy there is an element of power. So if desire is an exaltation of power, then its satisfaction is a lowering of tension, a weakening. Joy is an exalting sensation of expansion, the enlargement of the heart. Its absence is an inert condition which fear can easily be borne, and fear is a contraction, the opposite of expansion. Expansion is a state of serene confidence. It gives the impression of ease and liberty, and one breathes freely. Conversely, to breathe freely and deeply increases the vital force, and in turn this increase gives an exaltation which leads to joy. So joy is an essential element in the mastery of human life, and one should learn to cultivate it as a real fountain of vitality. The richness of any joy is always multiplied by being grateful for it, and that is why one should develop the sense of thankfulness. For to acknowledge a thing with thankfulness is to let it reverberate through one's being, and arouse there its own vibrations. To acknowledge a thing learned or received is to reflect it within one's self, and the reflection multiplies its value. But there are two ways of reflecting the light. One is the way of inanimate things, which like a mirror reflect outward a light fainter than they receive. The other is the way of living seed and organic matter, which concentrate the light within themselves and bring it to fruition. The thinking brain is a mirror of the world. It reflects energy outward, in the form of mental projections and fugitive thoughts. But these reflected waves contain no spiritual seed or vitalizing power. And emotion, if brought into contact with the intellect for purposes of verification, at once loses its character, and the vitalizing quality of its original impulse is destroyed. Just as energy is perceptible to us either as movement or as condensed into phenomenal objects, so too can emotion be canalized in different directions. It may be no more than an intellectual and therefore artificial reaction if confined to the mode of expression of the memory and the brain. But it can also become a vitalizing power if attended to with the inward ear, and if its repercussions are allowed to spread freely through the centers of vital energy. Joy, therefore, to enhance its power, should be met with thankfulness for its vitalizing quality. There are thousands of opportunities for real joy which can spread vitalizing vibrations through anyone who pays attention to them. The perception, for instance, of a pure work of art, the beauty of an appropriate gesture, the sudden moment of awareness, a sorrow overcome, the sudden shock that shows us the reality of a value. And yet man feels that he owes it to his self-respect to stifle his emotions and deny his sensibilities, or even out of avarice, to see how much they are worth and try to make some utilitarian profit out of them. He who, like a child or primitive, can let the vivifying flood flow into him, and concentrate it like a wise man in his heart, has found a secret fountain of life. For joy is a great treasure, and of incalculable power. Joy multiplied by thankfulness becomes a center of attraction for benefic vital forces, for its waves, being warm and altruistic, attract others of like nature, just as gloom attracts harmful vibrations and unhealthy forces. Deliberately nothing is said here of gratitude in the moral sense of thankfulness to a benefactor, for the fully conscious man has a different point of view from that of the herd soul. When a benefit received is of a material order, it amounts to a material debt, which the wise man will settle on that plane, in a spirit of justice and on account of karma. But if it is of a spiritual order, it will count as a joy to be welcomed and reflected on with love. For this inward reflection is the best form of gratitude to the benefactor, since in the spiritual realm a treasure is always shared between giver and receiver, simply because of the offered light being accepted and cultivated. Ingratitude in such a case would consist in refusing to accept the light, or in claiming all merit for it oneself. This cannot harm the giver, but is its own punishment, since such egoism obscures the light and cuts off contact with its source.